Welcome to Living at Your Finest podcast, a podcast devoted to helping women to live at their finest holistic health so that they are empowered to possess their worth, nourish their bodies and spirits, and triumph as health champions. I am your host, Dr. Babalola, aka Dr. Babs. I am a board-certified family physician, health and fitness coach, and the founder of Living at Your Finest company. Have you struggled with your holistic health, spirit, mind, and body? Perhaps you thought you had it all figured out only for it to come tumbling over. Imagine consistently living at your finest health with information that can transform your life and allow you to triumph holistically. Well, search no more. This podcast is just for you. Together we can triumph on this journey of holistic health as my guest and I share lessons learned from our personal health journeys using an exciting holistic approach, fun, fundamental, and faith-based. So I hope you're ready for some fun and candid dialogue. Hello again, Living at Your Finest champions. Dr. Babs here, pleased to be back as your host for episode 24 on Living at Your Finest podcast. Happy Friday and happy Go Red Day. Yes, Go Red Day. This is a day where it's dedicated for raising awareness about heart health. Heart disease is so common. It's actually responsible for the first killer in America as a whole, and 1/3 of all females' death. So it's so appropriate that today I'm actually going to be talking about heart health. The title is Love Your Heart, and this is part of our series, Health Focused Approach. We're going away from disease focused approach. All right, so I will discuss the preventative measures and how to love our heart as we talk about the 7 systems. If you recall, a few episodes back, I talked about the 7 systems that help us to live a better life in terms of health approach than disease focus. We stay away from taking care of illness and we lean more towards what's the root cause. So that's what we're going to be diving in today. But let's go into featuring our Living at Your Finest Health Champion of the Week. This is in person of Tammy G. She's an accountant and a YouTuber, a mother, a wife, and she shares how she's able to maintain a positive attitude during the pandemic.
Everyone, my name is Tammy. I'm an accountant, I'm a Christian, I'm a wife, I'm a mom of 3 kids, including 2 teens and 1 preteen. I've worked in finance for a couple of years, and during the COVID, I had to work from home. So I had to keep myself motivated by exercising and eating. I love a healthy lifestyle. So that inspired me to start working on my YouTube channel. Actually, I've had the YouTube channel for a while, but I never really put out content. So being at home and seeing a lot of situations not so positive, I decided that I was going to find a way to make a positive contribution in my own little way. That has been my passion. And you know, when passion meets purpose, it's a lot of fun, right? So that's what inspired me to start putting out content on YouTube. And you can find me on YouTube at Simply Tammy D, or you can simply Google Simply Tammy D and you will find me there.
The number 1 killer worldwide is cardiovascular disease, of which 90% of all heart disease can be prevented with a few simple habits. Cardiovascular disease is not just about the heart, it's about the vascular system. It's also about the endothelial system. And if you listened to the episode 22, I spoke about the synergy of all the 7 systems. So that consists of the cardiovascular, the communication system, the transportation system. We talked about the skeletal system, the GI system, the immune system. So go take a listen if you haven't right after this. So the heart is a pump that pumps blood through the arteries, right? And it goes from a bigger vessel to a smaller vessel, and it goes from the veins, which has the deoxygenated blood, so which just means the blood that doesn't have as much oxygen, and then the artery, which carries the oxygenated blood, so that the body has all the, the essential products that are needed for the body to function at its best. So the whole system is ultimately tied to how the heart runs and how the transportation all runs. As I mentioned, it delivers oxygen and it removes waste. So when we have damage taking place, whether it's in the cardiovascular system or the transportation system, it's like gum up in the pipe. So if you can imagine a pipe, yes, that is rusted, you can imagine how gooey that is. All the information in the pipe is just causing more damage. There was a big study in an European study actually called EPIC that found that incorporating four simple behaviors can dramatically reduce our risk of developing heart disease by almost 90%. And the habits I'm going to define fall under the category of finest, living at your finest. So in the EPIC study found that adhering to these four behaviors alone can prevent 93% of diabetes cases, 81% of heart attacks, 50% of cases of stroke. Have you seen any medication that is able to do that? No. So it's really going back to the root issue. What are those systems that are supposed to support us? Prevention is better than cure. If we can do our own part day by day, getting better to adhere to these four basic steps, then we can get rid of a lot of all the chronic diseases that we find that plague us as a society. We're going to be empowered by this information, and hopefully we can find some value. This is particularly important now, especially in this pandemic that we're in, because the biggest risk factor of COVID-19 is all these comorbid problems, all these chronic diseases, and of course most of them stem from the heart. So it's going to behoove us to understand these concepts. We hear all the time that, oh yes, I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes, or my family history, and you think that that's a death sentence. It's not. The science tells us about genetic risk. So our genes is able to load the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger. So some of the systems that are affected, let's get to it. All right, let's get to it. The first one is the endothelium system. And I want you to understand what the endothelium system means. It really is that cell layer that lines the inside of the arteries. Okay, it's very, very critical to our health. As you can imagine, if the pipe system, there's a layer, right? An outer layer. There's an inner and outer layer, but I'm talking about more of the inner layer where the blood flows through. So if there's damage there for whatever reason, or if it's so tense, it doesn't relax, then you can imagine blood pressure, high tension. If you're stressed, it makes everything constrict. And of course, if it's so constricted, you can imagine things are not going to flow as well as they're supposed to flow. And so that's the same thing with the blood. It doesn't flow well because the inner layer of the vessel is damaged. It's not relaxed. And so this is very important that we pay attention to what's stressing us. We need to make sure that we don't have endothelial dysfunction, because in the ability of our endothelia to function at its best, that's where all these diseases come from. Now, I don't know if you followed me long enough to know that I had blood pressure problems over 12 years ago, and it was stress. The doctor said they checked every single thing and couldn't figure out what was going on with me, and whatever was stressing me, high cortisol level, tensing me up, always in a sympathetic mode, always in an anxious flight or fight, mode. I definitely was doing a lot of damage. Now, the crazy thing about it, though, is that it's not when you manifest that was where the damage started. It's way ahead, way before. It's accumulating gradually, and then one day the body says, you know what, I can't take this anymore, I have to do something about it. And then that's where you have all those symptoms that we treat, but we need to go back to where the origin began. So that's the first one, endothelial damage. The second one is inflammation. I'm sure we've heard about inflammation a lot. Starchy foods, whatever, starchy foods, a lot of bread, rice, potato, it converts to sugar. Whenever it converts to sugar, you are allotting your own body's natural insulin, right, to come from wherever it's hiding in the pancreas to help to upload that sugar into the cells where it needs to serve as energy. Now, if there's just always so much sugar, always eating so much starch, that means you're waking up your insulin all the time. The insulin is supposed to spike and then go down. But if it's continuously like a roller coaster, it never catches a break. So that's what happens where we call insulin resistance. So the insulin might even come, but it's not working. It's fagged out. It's tired. So that's what happens when we have insulin resistance. Unfortunately, insulin resistance leads to fat storing. It leads to lots of inflammation because there's an inflammation cascade that takes place that further damages the endothelial cells. So this is why we always have to be very mindful of what we eat and what we put in our body. Now, the third thing that we need to be aware of that affects the cardiovascular system is cholesterol. And this is, it's funny because cholesterol has gotten a bad rep, but it's really in the presence of inflammation that cholesterol seems to be a bad guy. So if you look at it, let's say inflammation and cholesterol, inflammation started the problem and cholesterol is the bad guy. He's like the last person in the store, like a robbery. So inflammation has headed out and cholesterol is the one that is caught in the act. So that's what happens with cholesterol. Cholesterol in our bodies, it's good. We need cholesterol because it helps to, even though it can't move on its own to do the function that it needs to in our body, it's moved by lipoproteins. All right. So these are proteins. And so these lipoproteins are what we hear as the bad cholesterol, the LDL and HDL. LDL is bad cholesterol. HDL is good cholesterol. So the LDL helps to move from the liver, to the other parts of the body, the cholesterol that is needed for functioning, right? Now, the HDL, on the other hand, the reason why we say it's good is because it takes whatever is left, it gathers all the end products and takes it back to the liver for excretion. Now, what happens is that if there's inflammation, right, and there's inflammation in the endothelial lining and there's a damage. So like if you can imagine, you have a tap on a vessel, and then high pressure, it causes a wound sort of, and then you now have like a cascade of healing that takes place. Unfortunately, cholesterol, once it sees that, it's like, oh my God, I need to stop here and do something. So it deposits that cholesterol into that spot, and then it forms into a plaque over the years. So when it forms into a plaque over the years, it could break off and cause a heart attack because it's occluding blood supply to the brain to cause a stroke, and then to the heart to cause a heart attack. So that's what happens. So we need to be mindful of cholesterol. Of course, we have good fat and bad fat. We used to get all this information about fat being bad. No, but we need fat. We need it. It's essential for energy and for vitamins absorption and for nutrients absorption. I do have a video that speaks about the benefits of cholesterol in our bloodstream. So check that out on the YouTube channel. So it's important that we know that cholesterol is not the bad guy. It's just when it's in the presence of inflammation, and we need to be mindful of what is the good cholesterol and what is the bad cholesterol. All right. So now, what are some of those things that we can do that helps our heart, right? That helps us to have less of all this endothelial damage, less of all this inflammatory process, and less of the cholesterol. Now, a few things, again, as I said, I'm going to go back to nutrition. There's studies that have shown how beneficial blueberries have become my new best friend. I've developed a taste for blueberries now because it's been shown to help with endothelial repair. Anything that can help my vessels relax, I would eat those, right? So blueberries have been shown to do that. It has a lot of antioxidant properties, as well as a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. We want to make sure that we're eating high calorie foods, nutritious foods. We want to make sure that we're eating nutritious foods, right? Because that's what's going to provide our vessels the nutrients that is well needed. We want to make sure that we're eating more of natural. We want to eat healthier oils, healthy oils like olive oil, coconut oil, of course, in moderation, avocado oil. All of those oils are better. Nuts have been shown to be very beneficial for our vessels and for our arteries and for our heart. We want to make sure that we're having the omega fatty acids, right? The omega 3s, which we find in fish. If you're not a fish eater, I love fish. I grew up eating fish. So that gives you all the omega 3s that you need. You want to make sure that you're cutting back on oily foods. Anytime you eat fried foods, now I'm not saying don't eat it at all. You can do that 80-20 rule, at least start somewhere. But anytime you eat all those oily stuff, just imagine that they're clogging up your arteries over a period of time. Especially, the truth about the matter is that those restaurants, they don't use the best oil. And you can imagine the amount of heat whenever they're frying. It's causing oxidation, oxidizing. It's changing chemicals. It's changing the state from its original state, and it's clogging up your arteries. So you want to make sure that you're doing more of boil, bake, grill than frying your foods, because that will reduce your cholesterol level, will reduce the bad cholesterol. Definitely, you want to make sure that you're exercising. Exercise has been shown to increase your HDL, so that is your good cholesterol. Whenever you exercise, which is the recommendation, 30 minutes, 5 days a week, it helps to increase your good cholesterol, so it gets rid of the bad cholesterol that is circulating. After it's done its work, it's just the end product needs to be removed from there. All right, so those are very important. We need to make sure the 4S, 1S is sleep. Sleep is so important. When we sleep well, at least 7 hours or more, 7 to 9 is the recommendation. When we sleep, then our body is rejuvenated properly. We don't have high cortisol levels, which further damage the endothelial lining of our heart. So we need to make sure we sleep. Cannot overemphasize that. We need to make sure that the other S is stress reduction. So whatever it is that will help us to reduce our stress, we need to engage in that. So is it meditation? Is it social interaction, which is another S? We want to also make sure that we avoid substance abuse, so cocaine, marijuana, smoking. I know all these things are easier said than done. So you want to definitely reach out to your primary care provider to help you. So there you have it. All the preventative measures to ensure that we have a healthy heart. I hope that you have found some value and you will make an effort to ensure, even if it's just one thing that you can change today in your nutrition or your exercise or the 4S, just to ensure that your heart is working properly, reducing that inflammation overall, ensuring that you have a strong endothelial lining, and making sure that your cholesterol is under control. All of that will make a positive impact. I always used to tell my patients that there are 3 visitors that cannot stay in the same room at the same time: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and high sugar. So that causes havoc like nothing else on the heart. So next time, remember that you need to live at your finest health, because you deserve to, and you most certainly can achieve it. Thank you. God bless. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Living at Your Finest podcast. My hope is that as you have been informed, you would be transformed to take actionable steps to triumph at living at your finest health and personal development. For more in-depth content on best practices to ensure that you live at your finest daily, join me on Facebook and YouTube at Living at Your Finest with Dr. Babs, where we can learn together. My favorite hashtag healthiertogether. See you soon. Take care and God bless.